the Eightfold Path. I'm so happy you all got to focus on right speech for a week and for the rest of our lives last week, continuing last week. Thank you to Debbie and all of you. On Tuesday, I presented, it's on tape, Shodo Spring wrote the essay in the old Eightfold Path that I'm mostly drawing from. She's a transmitted teacher in Okamura's lineage and a climate activist. So it's a really wonderful essay. I was going to do a summation. The question always is what's the appropriate response from the depth of practice and meta practice, and from the precepts. Each moment is what's the appropriate response. It's an ongoing question forever that helps us turn our lives and the world. So today, another wonderful teacher who I also know and appreciate, Misha Shingen Merrill, who is a transmitted teacher in our lineage. Her teacher is Les Kay. So she has some, I think, really wonderful reflections and history here that I'm going to pull forward, and then we'll see what that has to do with us. It's right livelihood, work as spiritual practice. We're going to begin with her summary about the Eightfold Path. The 8 limbs of the Eightfold Path are meant to promote and perfect the 3 essentials of Buddhist training and discipline: wisdom, prajna; ethical conduct, sila; and mental discipline, samadhi. While each of the limbs begins with the word right, it is important to understand that it is not right as opposed to wrong. We've reviewed this, but I think we can keep doing this forever. So I know from studying and practicing the precepts with people over and over again, we're just so conditioned to set one thing up against the other, right and wrong, and there is right and wrong. And there's the practical and the absolute, the relative and the absolute. And the question always is what's the appropriate response? So let's see what she says. Rather, we are meant to understand it as, quote, a spirit of uprightness and truth around studying and asking questions about each of these. That's from Dan Layton. Uprightness includes the pure precepts of doing all good, causing no harm, and benefiting all beings. To truly understand one limb, right livelihood, excuse me, in this case requires understanding and integrating the other 7. This is why we study the limbs of the path individually as well as together. They are not meant to be rules to be accepted no matter the circumstances, but guidelines that intertwine, affecting and informing each other, depending on causes and conditions in this moment. In other words, it's alive. And our practice is to breathe, to find the ground, the aliveness in our own heart and bodies and minds, which is the heart and bodies of the mind of the whole world. And from this place of interconnection and interbe, I just closed my eyes, I opened my eyes, I'm here, I was before, interconnected with everything and each one of you and the whole world. And what's the appropriate response that arises out of goodness, that arises out of the vow to do no harm, that arises out of the language of the 3rd pure precept that I love the most, is to always act with everyone in mind. Impossible and beautiful. She then goes on to say that she thinks of all the limbs of the Eightfold Path, the one that has changed the most since Buddha's time is right livelihood. I mean, think about what it was like in Buddha's time. And there was an agrarian base, and what else does she say here? From his agrarian-based society, he could not have foreseen the work of modern-day people or the ways in which that work is increasingly at odds with Buddhist values of dignity, kindness, and respect, as well as our fundamental precept of causing no harm. Here's a wonderful Zen story. So we know Buddha was born in India. So Buddhism as we know it arose out of Indian culture, Indian soil, and then it moved to China. And each culture, each place that it has moved to has been informed by the culture in which it becomes enlivened and transformed and from the same root, which is part of the wondrousness of what's going to happen and what is happening here in the West as we bring the Western values, Western focus on emotions, Western Judeo-Christian mind, and these times that we're in. We don't know. That's our job. It's happening through us. But here's the question from China as it arose. It's from Pai Chong, and Dogen relates it in the fascicle called Ceaseless Practice. There was not a single day in the life of Pai Chong, from the time he became attendant to Matsu until the evening of his death, that he did not labor to serve people and to serve his assembly. To our gratitude, he left the words, "A day of no work is a day of no eating." Pai Chong was at the extreme of old age, and on occasions of all invited work, when everybody labored vigorously, the whole assembly felt pain and regret that their teachers should not be included in the work party. At least at one work time, some monks hid his tools and would not hand them over to him. He wanted to participate so badly. There are such wonderful stories about one of the reasons people love Suzuki Roshi, as I understood it, is he would go out and work with people, and the stories of placing the rocks at Tassajara in his garden. It's one of the things that's wonderful about going to Tassajara is when you walk in that garden, Suzuki Roshi put those rocks there. Samu, work practice. And the story is that he would get them all placed, and he'd look back and he'd say, "No, I think we should move them over there." And so you'd get up the next day and you'd move the rocks again. I mean, what an incredible teaching. That day, one day at work time, some monks hid his tools and would not hand them over to him. That day, Pai Chong did not eat as compensation for not using mattock and bamboo basket. It was like he was protesting. They wouldn't let him go out and play with them. He said, "A day of no work is a day of not eating." As Dogen observed, these words fill us even today with profound gratitude because they directly address the relationship between work and service, between dignity and usefulness, between caring for others and being cared for by others. In terms of right livelihood, these are the values to which Buddhists still adhere and try to practice in daily life. But what do we do now? It's not bamboo and mattock, it's computers and phones and modern technology, and oh my goodness, where are we? So let me share a little more. Maybe this was your experience too, was one of mine. She says, most of us are taught early in our lives to make a definitive distinction between spiritual pursuits and ordinary life. In my case, I went to church on Sundays and attended a Catholic education class one day a week. The rest of the time, life went on as usual with schools, chores, and family dinners that seemed to have little relationship to the homilies being taught from the pulpit. Given this early disconnection between our religious training and the rest of our lives, most people chose one path or the other as adults. To integrate both paths, however, is to understand the fundamental interconnectedness of our lives where right view and right livelihood intersect. Yesterday was, I think, Ash Wednesday. I remember that was one of my most favorite times, maybe as close, Christmas and Ash Wednesday, because it was physical and visceral. I never understood what they were doing. I mean, I was young, who knows what I was told or not told, but that when someone would take their thumb and put ashes on my forehead, I thought was one of the most amazing things that anyone ever shared with me as a child. And I think now what amazing continuity in a certain way that it brought me to Buddhism, just the physicalness of spiritual practice. And the emphasis in Buddhism is how do you live it? In some ways, the Judean-Christian tradition is very, very beautiful, and we can learn a lot from it because there is a real emphasis on service that Buddhism always doesn't bring forward so clearly. It does maybe more now, and I think we're all working on this. But I remember as a child not understanding at all what that hour in church on Sundays had to do with the rest of my life. I suppose that's been a lifelong pursuit, and maybe a question we're all still asking is how do we live and embody this? This is a quote from Marion Derby in her book, The Zen Environment. Most people in this country have been conditioned to regard certain kinds of work as respectable and other kinds as menial. This is very unfortunate. It takes a lopsided cultural posture. In Zen monasteries, humble tasks such as weeding the garden or washing the dishes are considered just as holy as the esoteric ceremonies performed by the priests inside the temple. So here's a little story from Aravaipa retreat. Some of you were there, so you got to experience it in person. Is about halfway through the retreat, we had a work meeting every day, and someone brought up that the bathrooms were getting a little well used, and we remembered and shared that in Zen monastic practice, the shuso, we don't do that in our daily, in our like Dharma Heart Zen. We're not living communally, so we can't bring this feature forward. But it's one of the things that moves me the most is that in a monastic situation, the shuso's job is to be the shuso and to give the talks and to do all those wonderful things, but to also clean the toilets. It's such a profound and deep teaching, because there's no high and there's no low. And I remember a person I went to India, and we just by chance ended up at the Hugging Mother. What's her? Can't think of her name right now.
Ama.
Say again?
AMA.
Oh, Amachi.
Amachi.
Yeah. Anyway, she that's a huge monastery. I mean, like, you can't even believe how many people are there. And her regular practice is she goes and cleans the bathrooms. To me, it made me trust her. Oh, you want me to clean your bathrooms? No. So anyway, but that's what we did. Is all of a sudden afternoon I would go into the bath. I mean, when I had to go to the bathrooms at the retreat, they were so beautiful. They were like shining. It's like, please take care of yourself on the cushion. Please take care in the kitchen. Such beautiful food and such care, and take care of everything, and don't put anything above or below the other. As a society, we tend to value work that we choose to do or that has a higher social or economic market value. This has a lot to do with social justice, seems to me, and economic justice. Right livelihood, on the other hand, is about valuing all work that is done in a meaningful and useful way, and honoring both the work and the one doing the work. In considering the relative value of work, Wendell Berry, who's so wonderful and so down to earth, wrote in Life is a Miracle. Unlike the culture of the European Middle Ages, which honored the vocations of the learned teacher, the country parson, and the plowman, as well as that of the knight, or the culture of Japan in the Edo period, which ranked the farmer and the craftsman above the merchant, our own culture places an absolute premium upon various kinds of stardom. This degrades and impoverishes ordinary life, ordinary work, and ordinary experience. It depreciates and underpays work of the primary producers of good and the performers of all kinds of essential but unglamorous jobs and duties. The inevitable practical results are that most work is now poorly done. Great cultural and natural resources are neglected, wasted, or abused. The land and its creatures are destroyed, and the citizenry is poorly taught, poorly governed, and poorly served. Ordinary life, ordinary work, ordinary experience for almost every human being. The majority of each person's day is taken up with ordinary work. When we divorce work from honor and dignity by elevating certain kinds of work while demeaning others as menial, we diminish the majority of our daily experience to drudgery and despair. A memory just rose because I was in the airport most of Monday with delayed flights, and everybody's bustling to somewhere or trying to get to somewhere. And to be in an airport, seems to me, you already have to be on a certain economic level in general, and it's really reflected if you look and see who's on airplanes. And I remember seeing out of the corner of my eye and then looking, well, I always feel this in airports, the people who come to serve the people who are going somewhere, the people all day long who are making 100 million lattes, or who are cooking up food, and I saw someone who was, we don't call them janitors anymore, but whatever our word now. And he was just walking along really slowly. I mean, not too slow, but he was just like in another world. Because he was taking care of something that needed to be taken care of. Who knows what his own view about what he was doing. But he was also he was a person of color. There's something about his posture that made me think that maybe he was from another culture, maybe his culture of origin was really moving to me. I don't know why. It's like, how do we not think what we're doing and where we think we're going is special? And how can we keep a wide enough view to when we're in the grocery store or when we're in the car or whatever we're doing, that there is nothing that is menial or high or above or below. think how that changes the whole world when we enter in that way. Let me just share a little bit more. This is Bernie Glassman. Well, Zen Center, I want to note, send up one of the things that Richard Baker did early on at Zen Center was set up the Zen Center businesses so that there could be right livelihood. So that those of us early on who came, we worked, it's changed now, but we worked at Green's, and we worked in the bookstore, and we worked in the bakery. That was all so that people could have the experience of integrating work and practice. And Bernie Glassman too set up a bakery for exactly the same reason. So there's really good impulse here. He says the main purpose of our livelihood is to sustain us. We need to make enough money to support ourselves and our family or community. We also need to make enough to put aside some reserves. But in order to truly support and enrich our life, our livelihood has to be more than merely a way to make money. When our livelihood lacks or contradicts our spirituality or study or social action, then we won't savor our work. When that's the case, we end up being malnourished or burned out. I think it's really important to note, because there's a good number of people here who are retired, aren't active in livelihood in the way that we were, but that doesn't matter. Whether you're caring for your partner, whether you're working for series, whatever you're doing, it is your offering to the world. It's your work in the most fundamental way. So there is no like getting out of this. Sorry, I'm not in that phase of my life anymore. I don't think so. I was just thinking in a certain way. Dying is also our work. It's like as long as we're alive, we're going to be doing something. So how do we do it? Today, we are confronted with more ambiguity about right and wrong than people faced 2,000 years ago. The interdependency of all things and the global consequences of our actions are more evident every day in media and public discourse. The truth appears flexible. Right and wrong results depend on one's perspective. The Buddha foresaw some of this in pronouncing the interdependency of all things, and he gave us a compass, our good intentions. By being thoughtful of others, seeing that there are no others, and acting with right intent, we have a path toward right livelihood. Imperfect as we all are, this path may have consequences we prefer to disavow, but we must proceed with compassion and understanding. Perhaps the one question we don't ask often enough is, what do I have to offer? We are so intent on analyzing what we can get from a job or an occupation or our lives that we rarely consider the sense of satisfaction that comes from offering our unique contribution. In other words, perhaps right livelihood is reflecting upon our choice of work in each moment, whatever is in front of us, by asking, what can I give rather than what do I get? As interdependent beings, perhaps right livelihood is the way that we can intentionally provide for ourselves and our families, while at the same time contributing to universal well-being and harmony. As Buddhist practitioners, our deepest intention is to benefit all beings while causing no harm. When we diligently apply this intention to our daily work in combination with our practice of the Eightfold Path and the Buddhist precepts, our work becomes spiritual practice and right livelihood very naturally appears. I just had the thought, it's one of the things that we do in Sangha is offer work within this context, is people come and help set up. It's spiritual practice work. At the end, when we help take things down, the tech people, the Doan people, the people who take care of the Zendo, newsletters, websites, there's a whole lot of offering of selves going on in this Sangha. Everybody is really, trust me, there's no shortage of, it would be really wonderful to be overwhelmed. Well, we don't know what to do, but we'll see what happens next. Showing up in a consistent way to Sangha is really, in a certain way, enacting right livelihood. This is my work. This is my practice. I'm here with and for all beings. I look at Susan Philog. My goodness, she just showed up. Each person wholeheartedly here. So here's my question that I liked from her essay. We'll have, I don't know, maybe 15 minutes. I'll put people in groups of 3. And you can, of course, talk about anything, whatever arises.